From a man who claimed he couldn't live without animals only to be mauled by the ones he loved, to a veteran zookeeper crushed on the job, these chilling zoo attacks show that even behind the bars and barriers, danger still lurks, often with deadly consequences. On the afternoon of May 28, 2016, a quiet day at the Cincinnati Zoo turned into one of the most unforgettable and tragic moments in recent memory. It began like any other visit. Families wandered the pathways, children pressed their faces to the glass of enclosures, and zookeepers tended to the animals. But near the Gorilla World exhibit, a 3-year-old boy had his own ideas. He wanted to go into the gorilla enclosure, and in a matter of moments he scaled a modest 3-foot fence, crawled through 4 feet of dense shrubbery, and tumbled over the edge. He dropped 15 feet into a moat that ringed the gorilla habitat. Within moments, zoo staff initiated their emergency procedures. A signal rang out for the animals to retreat indoors. 2 of the gorillas, both females, responded swiftly, but the third, Harambe, a 440-pound male silverback, remained. 17 years old, he had just celebrated his birthday the day before. Drawn by the sound of splashing water and the strange cries from above, Harambe descended into the moat. There he found the child, small, dazed, and floundering in the water. What followed was a surreal, heart-stopping 10 minutes. Harambe's behavior was ambiguous. At times he gently propped the boy up when he slipped. At others he dragged him through the water or pushed him back down when he tried to stand. His massive body towered over the child, and his gestures, interpreted by some as protective, were also laced with potential danger. Observers noted Harambe's strutting behavior, a display meant to show dominance. He walked stiffly, arms and legs rigid as if trying to look even larger. For gorillas, this was a bluff, a warning. But a bluff from a 440-pound silverback was no trivial matter. He could have inflicted fatal harm with a single motion. He lifted the boy, carried him, then brought him out of the moat onto dry ground. All the while, the crowd screamed, uncertain if they were witnessing a rescue or a rising threat. Time slipped away in those 10 minutes, each second stretched by dread. Zoo officials, monitoring the scene closely, were faced with a brutal decision. Tranquilizers, though an option, wouldn't act quickly enough. Worse, they could have startled or agitated Harambe, triggering an unpredictable reaction. With the boy's life hanging in the balance, the zoo's dangerous animal response team acted. A single rifle shot rang out. Harambe collapsed. He died instantly. The boy was between Harambe's legs when the shot was fired. A team of firefighters retrieved him moments later. Miraculously, his injuries were non-life-threatening. He was transported to Cincinnati Children's Hospital for evaluation, but the fallout from the event had only just begun. Harambe's death ignited a firestorm of public debate. Outrage erupted on social media. Many questioned why non-lethal means hadn't been used. Some blamed the boy's parents, others the zoo. Animal rights activists mourned Harambe as a victim of captivity, and vigils sprang up around the world. His image, once confined to the quiet of a zoo habitat, spread across every corner of the internet. Tributes, protests, and a flood of memes transformed Harambe into both a martyr and a symbol. Experts entered the fray. Jane Goodall, the renowned primatologist, offered a sobering perspective. The decision, she said, was tragic but understandable. A tranquilizer, she noted, could have taken too long to sedate Harambe and might have made the situation worse. But her words did nothing to soothe people who didn't want the animal killed. In the aftermath, the Cincinnati Zoo launched an internal review. Safety protocols were reassessed and updated. Barriers were reinforced. Staff training was reevaluated. But all of these couldn't bring Harambe back. Not all animals show the gentleness of Harambe, and this next case proves exactly why. On Christmas Day 2007, the San Francisco Zoo was in a festive mood as families and friends came to celebrate the holiday. But behind the veneer of seasonal joy, tragedy was poised to pounce. In a haunting and violent moment, Tatiana, a female Siberian tiger, transformed the cheer of the day into a nightmare that would sear itself into the city's memory. That afternoon, 3 friends, Carlos Eduardo Souza Jr., 17, and the Dhaliwal brothers, Paul, 19, and Colbert, 23, arrived at the zoo. They came from San Jose, spirits high and laughter flowing, drawn by the promise of an outing that would cap off a day of drinking and light drug use. Inside the zoo, they wandered until the allure of the big cats drew them toward the lion house. There, behind a 12.5-foot wall, 4 feet shorter than the minimum recommendation, Tatiana paced. Beautiful and formidable, she was no stranger to infamy, having mauled a zookeeper the year prior. But what unfolded that evening was unlike anything the zoo had seen before. Witnesses would later say the 3 young men taunted the tiger. Though the exact provocations remain disputed, court affidavits and circumstantial evidence told a troubling story. The trio had reportedly climbed onto a low railing beside the enclosure. A partial shoe print matching Paul Dhaliwal's was later found atop the barrier, placing them precariously close to the edge. There was also speculation they threw objects into the enclosure, although this was never confirmed. Tatiana, agitated and provoked, did what no one believed she could. She escaped. In a terrifying surge of raw power and intent, Tatiana launched herself over the wall. She cleared the moat and the ledge that was presumed impassable, and she began to hunt. Her first target was Paul. In a sudden rush, the tiger's immense paws and teeth tore into him. Colbert and Carlos reacted in an instant, desperately trying to pull Tatiana off their friend. It was a doomed effort. In the chaos, the tiger turned her focus to Carlos and lunged. There was no second chance for Carlos Souza Jr. In one horrific moment, Tatiana brought the teenager down. Her jaws crushed his skull and neck, severing his jugular. He died instantly, his young life snuffed out in a feral crescendo of muscle, tooth, and fury. His friends watched in stunned horror as Tatiana turned her gaze once more. The Dhaliwal brothers ran. Screaming for help, wounded and bleeding, they sprinted through the darkening zoo toward the cafe, some 300 yards away. Behind them, Tatiana pursued with chilling intent. Their blood smeared the ground, their cries pierced the air, but there was no sanctuary to be found. When they reached the cafe, their hopes collapsed. The door was locked. Inside, an employee heard the screams. Confused and panicked, she called 911, but the dispatcher, misled by vague descriptions, mistook the scene for a psychiatric emergency. The urgency of the threat outside remained unclear, and precious time slipped away. Meanwhile, Tatiana closed in again. The tiger, driven by primal instinct, reached the brothers once more near the cafe. She attacked with renewed fury, inflicting brutal wounds on their heads, arms, and torsos. The scene was pure carnage, blood on pavement, claws in flesh, the air filled with terror. Finally, zoo security intervened. A guard arrived and called for immediate lockdown. Armed police followed shortly thereafter, faced with a grave dilemma: shoot too soon and risk hitting the victims. Wait too long, and the tiger would kill again. They chose to distract her. As the officers advanced, Tatiana turned from the brothers toward the new threat. The decision to fire came in that frozen moment. Gunshots rang out. The tiger dropped, her body collapsing where she stood, her final roar silenced by the bullets. The brothers were rushed to San Francisco General Hospital, their bodies torn but their lives spared. Doctors worked through the night, and miraculously, both survived. Carlos Souza Jr., however, never left the zoo. His body was found near the Tiger Grotto, bearing extensive injuries, deep claw marks, skull fractures, and puncture wounds that told the tale of a swift and savage end. The medical examiner confirmed that his jugular vein had been severed. His parents were left to grapple with a nightmare no family should endure. As the truth emerged, the public reaction was explosive. The zoo faced scrutiny from every direction. Tatiana's enclosure had been below standard. The protocols, security, and even emergency responses were dissected and criticized. The incident prompted not only grief, but a national reckoning on animal captivity and visitor safety. The San Francisco Zoo was eventually rebuilt, both structurally and reputationally. Barriers were reinforced, protocols changed, but the shadow of that day remains. Carlos Souza's death and the scars on Paul and Colbert Dhaliwal are etched into the history of the place. Tigers are not to be taken lightly even by their own keepers. This keeper messed up, and it cost him dearly. April 22, 2025 began like any other morning at the Mariupol Zoo, nestled in the war-scarred shadows of Russian-occupied Ukraine. Among the scattered staff who arrived early that day was Alexei Melnikov, a 34-year-old zookeeper known to his colleagues simply as Lyosha. He was a man of habit and heart, unwavering in his devotion to the creatures under his care, particularly the big cats. To outsiders, Mariupol Zoo was a relic from a more peaceful past, battered now by years of conflict and neglect. But to Alexei, it was a sanctuary. The air might have been tense with politics and danger beyond the gates, but inside, amid the thrum of caged life, he felt at home. He once told a Russian TV crew that he can't live without animals. Those who knew him believed it. He had worked with predators for years, first at Yalta Zoo in Crimea, then here in Mariupol, and his bond with the animals was instinctive, almost intimate. Among the animals he worked with was Lucy, a white Bengal tigress. She was the crown jewel of the zoo's struggling menagerie. Majestic and fierce, she had recently given birth to 4 rare cubs, making her both more irreplaceable and more unpredictable. The staff treated her with reverence and caution. A mother tiger is a volatile force, driven by instinct sharpened through evolution. Even Alexei, seasoned and steady, understood the heightened risks of going near her during this time. But routine breeds familiarity, and familiarity can dull the senses. That morning, Alexei prepared Lucy's food with practiced precision, chatting briefly with fellow keeper Galina Zamarakina before heading toward the enclosure. The two had worked side by side for years. They trusted each other, and they trusted the routines. He believed the tiger was in a wooden den built to isolate it. Moments later, everything went wrong. Lucy had not been moved. Whether distracted by his thoughts, tired from another long morning, or lulled by repetition, Alexei had made a devastating mistake. The tigress was still inside the den, quiet and invisible, shielded by the wooden shadows. As he entered with the meat, Lucy emerged, fast, silent, and full of primal intent. The attack was over in seconds. A blur of white fur, the sound of claws against concrete, then a scream that echoed across the compound. Galina turned at the sound and froze. From the edge of the enclosure, she saw the scene unfold, saw the animal she had helped raise now drenched in blood, saw her friend fall. In a flash of clarity, she acted. With shaking hands, she managed to close the cage's secondary door, trapping Lucy before the tigress could do more harm. The Russian investigative committee opened a formal inquiry, focusing on potential negligence and violations of safety protocols. Preliminary findings painted a bleak picture. There had been no double checks, no surveillance confirmation, and apparently no backup keeper monitoring the process. Lucy, a known risk, had not been secured. The tragedy triggered renewed scrutiny of Mariupol Zoo's operations. It was not the first time the facility had faced criticism. Animal welfare advocates had previously cited poor conditions, outdated enclosures, and inadequate staffing. War and occupation had only exacerbated the problems. Lucy, for her part, was not euthanized. The zoo, recognizing that she had only acted on instinct, decided to keep her in isolation with her cubs for the foreseeable future. She would never again have direct contact with human staff. While Alexei did make a serious mistake, the tiger's aggression may have been due to recently giving birth. But it's not just tigers. Hippos can be just as dangerous. The morning of July 28, 2024, began like countless others at Bhagwan Birsa Biological Park in Ranchi, India. The chirping of birds and the rhythmic brushing of brooms across pathways gave the illusion of peace. But inside the hippo enclosure, a quiet tension had begun to stir, one that would end in tragedy. Santosh Kumar Mato, a seasoned zookeeper with over 2 decades of experience, entered the pen with practiced ease. At 54, he was known not just for his quiet dedication, but also for the gentle rapport he had developed with many of the animals in his care. That morning, he carried a basket of feed, eyes set on the newly born hippopotamus calf that had arrived just days earlier, a rare birth and a moment of pride for the zoo staff. But inside the enclosure, instincts ruled. The mother, still raw with the vigilance that comes with new motherhood, saw Mato not as a caregiver, but as a potential threat. In a sudden burst of violence, the massive animal lunged. What followed was a frenzied, terrifying moment that left Mato crushed beneath her weight, limbs shattered, his cries lost amid the chaos. Fellow zookeepers rushed to his aid, prying him away from the animal's reach and speeding him to a private hospital, but the injuries were too severe. Hours later, Mato was pronounced dead. News of the incident swept through the zoo like wildfire. The reaction from his colleagues, 112 caretakers bound by shared labor and danger, was swift and emotional. They gathered at the park's main gates, locking them shut in protest. Their grief burned into fury, not at the animal, but at a system they felt had failed their friend. They demanded accountability, better safety protocols, and acknowledgement of the risks they shoulder each day. Zoo Director Jabbar Singh addressed the media confirming that the zoo had covered Mato's medical expenses and was committed to supporting his bereaved family, including exploring job opportunities for them within the organization. Yet behind the formal statement lay a truth no policy could soothe. One of their own was gone, taken by the very world he loved and served.